I am. Thanks, Alex. Okay, let's start. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all, even if it's in this way. I think personally, I'm very thankful to Alex that this thing is actually happening. I believe it all the way that it's actually going to happen, and I think it's a great thing that we're having at least this chance of hearing each other and during this period of time, and it's definitely much better than not meeting at all. This is what we have. Let's make the best of it. What I've been doing for the past few months is, as usual, doing all sorts of stuff for ControlUp, and mainly dealing with all sorts of business data, all sorts of interesting information that we gather over time. You know, I've done a lot of invested a lot of time in researching logon duration and other aspects of user experience. But this time, you know, in the past couple of months, I've been getting a lot of questions about the recent changes to the reality of work from home and Citrix workloads and VDI work, everything that has to do with basically the recent changes to the way that we work. And I did some analysis, which I'm going to present to you today. This is basically something that shows a year of data, meaning half a year of last year and half a year of 2020 for some comparison. But mainly we're focusing on the last 6 months from starting beginning of 2020. And what I try to do here is sort of show and share with the industry experts the impact of the recent changes on the reality of the actual end user computing world. And by actual, I mean I'm looking at real data that's coming from customers. And since we're aggregating a lot of customers together, I have no problem sharing with you the data. There's nothing identifiable there on the level of the specific customer. We will be talking about different geographies and different industries. So let's get started. Basically, let me just explain a couple of things about the data set. So we're looking at a large real-world global data set, looking at actually more than 1,000 organizations, but we filtered out. I'm going to talk about filtering a little bit. But the final data set has 893 organizations. I'm calling them organizations, but basically, you know, you can refer to them as customers. Obviously, the data comes from the ControlUp online databases, so they're all ControlUp customers. That's one factor that's definitely true for all of them. Other than that, those are mainly Citrix customers, but we also have a lot of different customers using different technologies other than Citrix. And let me talk a little bit about the data set and what we're actually looking at. So basically, we know every time that our customers use ControlUp to monitor their end user computing infrastructure, so be it VDI or SBC, RDS, XenApps and Desktop, Horizon, and different other technologies, some even not server-based and not VDI, a little bit of traditional desktop. The end result is we actually see how many user sessions are established at every customer every day on a daily basis. We're looking at the peaks, and this is our key metric here. We're going to be talking about the peak user sessions monitored daily. So think of the entire 893 customers as one huge farm, VDI farm, and you can imagine that there's activity which fluctuates inside that farm, and it varies according to different factors. So that's what I'm basically trying to show here. How did the activity of all those customers and all those end users eventually vary during the last few months? Because we're actually seeing a lot of changes to our lives. We're seeing the changes to our work reality, and the end user computing world, or the computing world in general, maybe is reacting to all those changes in some ways which are not necessarily similar to other industries and other parts of life. So let's look at some findings. Just a couple more things that I want you guys to know about the actual data set. So the time frame is from January to June of 2020. That's the time that I'm focusing on. And we're filtering out countries with significant data. So there are a few countries for which we don't have enough customers. And by enough, this is on the case-by-case basis. I'm not going to dive into all the numbers and how actually we determined not enough, but some countries for which we just have a handful of customers with not enough load. I just filtered those out. And only organizations or customers who were active throughout the entire period will make it to the final data set that you will be seeing here. What I meant to do by that is to exclude any type of growth in terms of new customers. So there are new customers coming and they're onboarding and starting using Control Up, and then we see that they have more activity in their environment. I don't want this to influence the data. I just want to look at the ones who are already inside the database and who've been reporting data for the entire period of time. And the same goes for ones who stop uploading or sending us data for this reason or another. Those are excluded as well. So the companies, organizations that you will see here were active and reporting significant data throughout the entire period of time. And we're just looking at the difference, where they're reporting more or less. Okay, let's start looking at the actual data. But before that, just some ground rules. This is going to be like a traditional session. So we drink and ask. So basically, whoever has a question, just raise the question in the questions area, and I'll try to keep an eye on it. Hopefully, it will be moderated and reaches me right away. And you can type them in chat as well. And since you all guys are at home or in a place where you can be as comfortable as you can, so please get a drink and have one with me when you're asking the questions. I have some webcam issues here, unfortunately. Tried to connect to it a couple of times, but it still doesn't really go. I'll try it a couple of times more. Hopefully, we'll be able to toast through webcam. But anyway, prepare a drink if you have any questions. So if you have any questions, shoot them to the chat or to the questions area. Okay, so let's start looking at the actual findings. 2019 versus 2020. This is just, if you're looking at any monitoring solution, you probably are familiar with the curves, or it represents the weekly activity going up during the weekdays and then going down during the weekends. Basically any system that's monitored over time will produce this sort of up and down curve, as long as it has this weekly routine of work life. So if we were comparing 2019 to 2020 for the first part of 2019 to the first part of 2020, it looks pretty similar. I mean, we did get a lot more sessions monitored in 2020, but it definitely seems like the graphs are pretty similar. I mean, the green one is a little bit taller, so we're monitoring a lot more user sessions, but then it doesn't seem to be really growing. But there's many ways of presenting data, and there's many ways of looking at this data, and I try to dig a little deeper into the trend. And I just plotted the weekly max, the weekly peak of the user sessions that were monitored, which in 2019 was around 500,000 sessions daily. That is daily. Okay, so every day our customers are monitoring a max peak of about 500,000 user sessions concurrent for all of the customers taken together. Of course, nobody's looking at all of those sessions together, hopefully, and go crazy. But this is what happened during 2019. During 2020, we started off at about 800K daily concurrent user sessions monitored, and the weekly peak trend went up to about 880. So about a 10% growth overall, which we did not see in 2019. So what that indicates is, and there are a lot of ways to attack this claim, and to find all sorts of issues with the way that we're looking at the data. But just a straightforward insight from this data is that, yeah, we do see more activity, more growth in activity per customer. So most of our customers are probably exhibiting more growth than a decrease in activity. in 2020, and this is something that cannot be attributed to just something that happens every year, right? So in 2019, if we looked at the same customers throughout the first 6 months, we didn't see any growth. So something definitely happened. So always when you take a look at the global and large data sets like this, the closer you look, the more complexity you start seeing. So, and complexity is good, but it needs to be, sometimes it deserves a bit of an explanation. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the actual data and start looking at this thing by country first, right? So I want to look at the different countries. And what I'm going to do is just explain really quickly the metrics and the way I'm visualizing those metrics here, right? So this is going to be for all the next slides. The next few slides are going to be all about different countries, and they're all going to have the same visualization here. So what you see here is actually the months, right? January, February, March, April, May. Those are the daily peaks, right? So daily peaks of user sessions. You can see this is the weekend, this is a new week, this is the weekend again, and so on and so forth. This is for 2020, since January until May. And on the same timeline, right? So the timeline, imagine it's affecting all the graphs. I'm going to show a couple more things. This, the blue line here, represents the weekly peaks, right? So the weekly peaks for that geography that I'm going to be looking at, it's here. It's also here in this chart. It's just when I'm looking at it in the daily level, it's harder to see. So the trend line here in green actually represents the growth in just a little bit of a easier way to see. And pay attention to the actual difference in numbers. Sometimes the numbers are not that far from each other, but I do want to show that there is a growth. So I'm not, this is just default visualization. So I'm not, didn't manipulate the data so that it looks like growth, right? It will be pretty apparent when there's growth or where there's not. And the last thing about the visualization is that I basically pasted on top of this chart some graph that you probably are familiar with the last couple of months. Is the number of new cases, new COVID-19 cases for each country. And this was done mainly to sort of correlate this in time, because when something is happening and something is happening in parallel, if you see the trend at the same time, sometimes it sort of explains things and ties them together. I'm not inferring that everything is causality here, right? So I'm not saying this caused this or this caused that. I'm just showing you, okay, those things happen in parallel. So let's discuss. Okay, so let's look at a couple of examples by geography. Hopefully this will make a little more sense after we explain the actual metrics. So this is the US, right? US, I have to say, this is about 60% of our customers. So this is the largest chunk of the database, our American customers. So what we saw during this 6-month period is a pretty apparent about 10% increase in activity. So again, for existing customers who worked and reported data for the entire period of time, we see about a 10% increase in activity, and we did not see any significant, surprising fluctuations here. It didn't suddenly shoot up, and it didn't suddenly, just plunge. And data on this scale rarely behaves in those surprising ways, because there's a lot of customers here, a lot of different activity behind this. But overall, when we're averaging things, and this is what we have to do with statistics when we sort of chunk things together and try to present one short story about this. So the short story about the way that we see the American EUC, I don't want to say market, because this is not in no way a market analysis or something, but the EUC activity, meaning user sessions in the VDI and FTC and whatever environments that we're monitoring, grew by about 10% during that period of time. And whether this trend is going to continue in the next few months, we'll try to keep an eye on that. But this is the finding that I'm seeing for the US. In the UK, we actually see something similar, but with an even stronger effect, so about a 20% increase. There's a lot fewer customers in here than in the US, right? But still enough to visualize this sort of trend. This is not just some huge customer influencing everything. You know, this is comprised from many different organizations in different industries. So there's a pretty apparent growth from, you can see that was about 40,000 peak weekly peaks, and about a little bit more before that, and you know, in the end it's over 60,000, right? So and a definite increase in activity, and this is something that we saw that happened in the UK. The Netherlands, we see also the strong 20% increase, and again, just plotting the COVID active cases on the same time chart, maybe sort of, you know, indicate hopefully the trend that we're seeing, that it's subsiding and going down, and maybe the you can tell that it didn't just go up when the number of cases went up, and didn't just go down right after that. So it's more of a long-lasting effect. Maybe it will continue growing afterwards, but there's definitely an increase in work in those in the Netherlands. For Germany, we did not see any significant change from a baseline, right? Again, and we can probably be deceived by the trend line here that goes crazy up and down, but it's actually the difference between those values here on the y-axis is pretty small. So there was no significant change. It didn't just go up or down. It goes a little bit up and down, but there was no clear trend in the results that we saw from Germany. In Italy, which I wouldn't normally look at because there's no huge activity coming from there. As far as we're concerned, so there's a lot of users in total that our customers monitor in that geography. But definitely, given the context, you know, I thought it would be interesting to look at Italy as well. So we saw a pretty, you know, again, you can say this is coincidence. I don't necessarily think that, but if you look at the actual trend line, you know, and the weekly peaks, so it goes down just as the number of cases peaks, and it goes up back again. So that was about a 10% decrease in activity and a recovery to baseline. And this interesting reaction, you know, that we didn't see in other geographies that we discussed previously. Also in France, we see something similar but more radical. So again, I'm sure that there are many different explanations for this, and the way that the market is built, and the way that the economy reacted, and the way that the cultural aspect of work influenced this. But you know, the numbers are numbers, and this is what we're seeing. So in France, we did see a very significant decrease in activity, up to 70% decrease, and which went, you know, you can see, look at the peaks here from around almost 3,000 to just about 1,000 users. So again, this is not a huge chunk of our database here, but this is representative, and we sort of see this trend in most of the French located customers who we checked here. And in Israel, well, obviously we want to know about ourselves. So we're based in Israel, and we want to know what happened there. So we also saw this sort of up and down trend, right? So sorry, down and up, right? So the activity went down, and not very radically, but not something that you wouldn't see either, right? So there it goes, you know, about a 20% drop in activity and a partial recovery back to baseline, which we already see. You know what, I can speak to that, right? So here we are trying to slowly come back to normal. So the control of offices in Israel are open. We're going to the office, and it's a little bit different from what it was before. So we have all sorts of different new regulations and different behaviors that we now have at the office. But still, work goes on, and you know, people go to work, and that's good to see. Good to see that. Hopefully, it won't be too it won't be something there that we need to cling to as a memory, and this is something that will indicate a clear trend of going back to normal. That we all hope, I guess, about testing. So, by the way, questions. I want to remind if there are any questions. I don't see anything in the questions pane. I don't know if you guys are live. Please type something in the chat if you guys are. So, okay, a little bit more of the geographies that we saw. I didn't analyze all the countries, and I'm not going to go through all the countries. Just thought the ones that were, discussed a lot during this last couple of months. I thought we would include these, and also the ones for which we actually have data. So this is Sweden. We saw a little bit of an increase, right? So about 10%, sort of the trend similar to the US, maybe. Hopefully just in that, right? So in the 10% increase, we do see that in the Swedish workloads. 10% decrease in Belgium with a partial recovery. This is something that we're seeing there. So again, you can see that there are a few trends here. That in some countries it was a steady increase overall the entire period of time, and in some countries it was a drop and then a recovery. Right. So this is something that we're seeing. Those are two main shapes that I saw in this curve. And one thing that is should be asked about this data is, first of all, okay, so geographies are great, but different customers are different from each other also by the things that they do, and different industries were affected differently. So definitely I did look at the actual industry, right? So let's see. Those findings, I think, will probably not be really surprising for anyone. They should, we all pretty much know which industries got hit the worst, but it's sort of comforting. It's sort of nice to find the reflection of this in our data. For us, it's good to know that the data actually represents well, or is tied well to the expectations and to what we want to see in terms of its reflecting of the actual workplace reality. So if in the industries such as entertainment, the activity dropped so much that the peaks, here were around, more than 12,000 daily users concurrent. Here they're more than there's less than 3,000 users concurrent per day. So a very significant drop. The same about hospitality. You see the same thing happening, here over the course of February and March. Here for hospitality a little bit later. For recreation, also about the same time as hospitality all went down, and transportation, also travel and tourism, staffing, I guess, also makes sense. So those industries, in them we actually saw a decrease in activity, and sometimes a very drastic one. And one question that I asked myself pretty early in this research was, okay, so let's say that there is a significant decrease in activity in a certain industry. What happens to the user experience there? So thankfully, we do have the data. It's a lot of data and it takes time to process, but we do look at I did look at the actual user experience data, trying to correlate, okay, what happened in the entertainment industry when the number of users dropped so drastically, and what happened in terms of user experience. And one metric that we have that is proven very reliable and pretty industry accepted for measuring user experience is Logon Duration. So let's see how Logon Duration reacted to this change. So I'm just basically plotted this on top of the same chart so that you will see the trend in time. So in the entertainment industry, as the number of users plunged like this, you can see that the actual Logon Duration, which is represented by the orange line over here, it went from pretty close or just above the industry standard of about 27-30 seconds. That's the average. It just went up and up, and it went all the way up. The average went all the way up to about a minute. So this is sort of counterintuitive, because you would expect that as less people use those systems, the systems will become faster. But this is not what's happening. So we don't have time to dive into all the possible explanations for that, but I think what's happening here, and you can see the trend, sometimes it's different, right? In recreation, it did go down from about 30 seconds to about 25 seconds, right? It did become a little bit faster. And in hospitality, it came from, from above a minute to down to about half a minute. So it basically, there's a lot of different variations between different customers, but a given environment may react in different ways to the fact that there are more or less people using the system all of a sudden. So in this case, what's probably going on is that there are less users working. Maybe the users who did continue working were, on less optimized workloads, and maybe they did stay at work and continued working, and for them the experience was not so good. So that's one possible explanation. Renee is commenting here that remote logons take longer than logons on-prem. That's one thing that definitely can be a part of the reason here. In this case, we would probably see, that's definitely one explanation that can take care of that phenomenon. But then there are all kinds of different curves that are not taking care of that. One thing that I want to sort of focus on is, okay, we always think of systems that are not optimized, sometimes in terms of resources. That's probably the first thing that comes up. Okay, do they have enough hardware resources to run the system? Okay, so let's look at this data as sort of a way to test the hypothesis. Okay, so if there are less people working with the system and it has a resource overload, then probably the user experience is supposed to go down. If the less people, so the user experience, the login duration is supposed to go down in the sense that user experience is now better, so there are less people using the system. And if there are more people using the system, we're expecting the system to become more overloaded. So the more effect this actual increase of users has on the system, the more it's dependent on the actual shortage of resources, which we can look at if we just take a look at the flip side of the picture, right? So we have industries with increased activity, which is also probably not surprising to you guys. Everybody knows what happened in different industries who continued to actually working, which industries were more prepared to working remotely and did have all the systems in place. And some of, in some places probably part of these guys, continued going to work as regular also. So there's a lot of growth in banking, administration, energy, finance, packaging. This is really more of an outlier, but I did want to include it because it looked pretty. There's not much happening in that industry as far as we're concerned, but yeah, there is a clear trend there. Those industries, again, let's look at the UX side of things. So I just analyzed those two. Because in the others, I did analyze them. I'm not presenting them because in those industries, I don't see any significant change. I did see this thing over here, which is sort of this spike that goes up in login duration, and that's a significant spike. So that goes from about a half a minute to over a minute in average, right? So around the time that the activity started to grow, both here and here, you see those big spikes. So that sometimes may indicate, again, I didn't check exactly what's happening behind the scenes in every customer here, but one interesting hypothesis is that when you increase the number of users, first things break and become really horrible, and then you adjust, then you fix, then you add more resources, and that may explain why it goes down after that. But please note that it doesn't really, become better than before, right? So the news here are that maybe user experience is not that good. By the way, look at the numbers, right? In banking, we see the average logon was about a minute on average, right? So that means that a lot of people are getting logons slower than a minute. That's horrible user experience, and but I guess they're not in a hurry. But here it went to about 2 minutes average, which is really horrible. So it went from bad to worse. But then again, for the other industries, I guess they came more prepared. I guess for you can argue that in those industries, the response to the increase in activity was better because we don't see this anomaly, or we don't see any major spikes, and we don't see an increase in Logon duration in those industries as the activity grew, which indicates some things. And there are various additional things that can be tested. I'm sure you guys have a lot of different ideas, and you, of course, welcome to share those with me. And you know, if possible, I maybe will check them in the data. Those two industries I did want to highlight. So there's government and there's healthcare, which were, you know, healthcare especially was in the center of the entire story. So overall, you did see what you do see here is that healthcare, both healthcare and government, were resilient in terms of user experience. So Logon duration did not go up, and government, in both in government and healthcare, even though the activity, if you look at the this around this time here, so end of January it starts. It doesn't, you know, the peaks stay pretty much the same, but the weekend activity goes up. So as people work 24/7, I guess that was very active during February, and then went down a little bit in March. But you do see that as far as user experience, the Logon duration is concerned, we don't see a huge or any significant change in activity or in user experience over time, even though the activity here does grow, and you know, was basically probably those organizations you can say that they were more perhaps prepared to working remotely and working in using the virtualized systems, or just kept working because they have to. To summarize, before summarize, actually, I have one more minute, so just really quickly, I looked at a couple of specific examples. So I'm not going to identify these, but this is a healthcare customer over here. And as you see, as they picked up a lot of new activity in March and started working, a lot more users started working with the system. As the daily peaks of average Logon duration became more frequent, there were a couple of peaks. Again, this is over a minute. This is average Logons over a minute, which is not good. And you can see that those spikes became much more frequent after the increase in the number of users in this particular customer. And this is another healthcare customer who exhibited even different, more worrying trends. So around the time when the activity started growing, there were a consecutive weeks of horribly long logons. The average was so high, you know, there were a lot of, I checked the actual data, it's not just a couple of outliers. The user experience was really, really, really crappy here during this period of time. And then they probably fixed, and it not only fixed, but also went, you know, it became a little bit better than before. The good news here is that, you know, those things are controllable. User experience is controllable as long as you actually look and you implement the steps needed in order to bring everything back to normal, or to optimize for the growth. This is a transportation customer, so activity went down, and the average daily Logon duration just stayed pretty much the same, and it stayed horrible. So as you can see, those are 2-minute logons before and after, and here are also a few days of really, really bad user experience. But you can say that in a system like that, the optimization is probably not about hardware resources. And this is good news for us, right? Because in the E2E experts to experts conference, we're all experts, and you know, probably, hopefully, this type of insight is useful and can guide and inspire you guys to look at UX as activity increases or decreases in the different industries. Those are key takeaways for 2020 so far, as I'm concerned. So here we have a global trend of about a 10% increase in EUC activity. It varies by country and industry. In the US, we do see this 10% increase. In the UK and Netherlands, we saw 20%, and there are different other trends in different countries. Another significant trend is that you don't see a steady increase, but you do see a decrease and then a recovery, a partial recovery. We saw that in Italy. We saw that in places like France. We saw in Israel, so a little bit of a decrease and then a recovery. And we see differences between different industries. More users usually lead to worse UX than before, especially beware the first week when as more users start to connect to the system. So that, I guess, one key takeaway here is that we need to be aware of that time. And when we actually make the change to the system, we allow users to more users to access the same system. The assumption should be that things are not going to get better in terms of user experience and in terms of resource consumption. Less users does not mean necessarily better UX, because sometimes the suboptimal or non-optimal things that you have in the environment are not really about resources. They're more about configurations that affect everyone, regardless if there's not enough hardware resources in the system. And honestly, when you look at a system in which the average logon is 2 minutes, I usually tend to say that it can't be all resources. There has to be some attention to it that will make it better over time. And it's not only pouring money on top of it to solve the problem, but also some analysis and some digging into the actual environment and trying to eliminate the causes for slowness. So if you guys, there are a lot of great brains in the audience. I'm so thankful to Alex and to Tui for letting me present here and to have a chance to show this to you guys. Hopefully, this has been a little bit new to you guys. There's been at least a little bit of useful takeaways. And if you got any ideas on follow-up research or any things that you think would be nice to add or to look for in the recent trends, or to look for in the future, I always like looking at real industry data, and to present this to the relevant audience, I think is a great chance and a great opportunity, for which, again, Alex, thank you very much. I don't see any questions or additional comments. So with this, I thank you all for attending. It's been great presenting this, and stay in touch. Hopefully see everyone at the next E3, whatever it will be.